Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Jai, Bahasham, Rechak Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Esther, the 9th chapter. Pretty much now we're dealing with, because remember, right, as we read in the previous chapters, even when Haman had that decree sent out for the Jews to be exterminated, that was, the lot fell on I think it was the 12th month, right? The 12th month. And at that time, they were still somewhere around the first or second month, maybe third or fourth. So there was still some time to go before that 12th month came upon us. And in between then, the Lord had it to where, Esther and Mordecai were able to get to the king and have that decree, sort of reversed via another decree. So here in Esther 9, we're now at the time of the 12th month, where you have some people who, had it in their minds, to the enemies of the Jews, that is, to adhere and stick to what Haman sent. And then you had the others that, decided to help the Jews to fight against those that wanted to harm them on this day. So this is Esther chapter 9, verse 1. It says, "Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the month, or of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them." See, so you still had those that were considered the enemies of the Jews that still wanted to use this as an opportunity to harm them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. And remember, this empire was huge, right? All the way on the west from Ethiopia all the way to the border of India. He had provinces all throughout, 127. So the Jews that were in different parts, everybody was aware of what was going on. So as it says, they gathered themselves together, ready to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. And no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. So anybody that tried to harm them, they had the free range to take them out, to defend themselves. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Because remember, in that second letter or decree that Mordecai had sent, it was that they should help protect the Jews against these enemies that would still seek their hurt even after the elimination of Haman. Verse 4, for Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Once again, this was also in that vision, right, that Mordecai had in the very beginning. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. So you can imagine what that day was looking like, like almost like the purge, right? But modified a bit. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Horatha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashtha, or Parmashta, and Arisai, and Aridai, and Vejezatha, or Vejezatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha. The enemy of the Jews slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. So in Shushan, right, where the palace was, the Jews took the opportunity and they took out the sons of Haman. Okay, but they didn't, as it says, they didn't touch their spoil. They didn't take any of their riches, anything, that their belongings, none of that. It's kind of interesting, right? When you think back to Saul, how Saul was his decree that the Lord gave him, his order was to slay all the Amalekites, and that's it. Slay their sheep, cattle, all of that. But he went and actually brought back the king and the spoils. Right? So it's just interesting here that, they didn't touch any of their stuff. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy further request? And it shall be done. So, you requested that your people be able to defend themselves so that they wouldn't be exterminated, right? Well, word has come that they took out 500 people just here alone. I wonder how many they've taken out in other places, but is there anything else? What else do you want? But this wasn't the king wasn't upset asking this. He was just asking okay, is there something more? Verse 13, then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon gallows. Now in this verse, remember, the sons were already slain, but them being hung meaning their bodies. Okay, just to make that part clear. And the king commanded it so to be done, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hand. So on the 13th day they slew. On the 14th day they slew because Esther requested for them to be able to have permission to do so. But you notice they're not taking any of their spoil. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. Once again, they didn't touch their spoils. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested day, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. And that's going into, as we keep on reading, the holy day, right, of Purim. Verse 17, on the 13th day of the month Adar. I think I just read that. Yeah, I just read that. Verse 18, but the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same day rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. So the Jews that were in different provinces, they did the slaying mainly on the 13th day, and on the 14th they rested. But at Esther's request, the ones in Shushan did some slaying on the 13th, continued on the 14th, and on the 15th they rested, as it says, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. So, it was a day of rejoicing, right? And rightfully so, right? We just got delivered. The Lord completely flipped the script from extermination, right, to deliverance. So, sending gifts, and just being grateful and joyous of this deliverance the Lord had brought us. Verse 20, and Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them. This is just another way of saying to establish or to enforce this, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. So this was Mordecai instituting that holy day of Purim, okay, which came from the deliverance of Israel from the hands of their enemies by Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. So it's a day of gladness, of joy, as it says, feasting. And going into this word portion, right, it says here, something weighed out, a division, specifically food, right, a ration, also a lot. So, gift would be a general term for this you could think of. Anyway, continuing. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them. Because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. Because remember, that's what they did, right? They casted a lot to see what month, what day, right, that they should perform their enterprise or their devices. And the Lord flipped it on that day. Verse 25. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he had devised against the Jews, that device going into those plans or schemes, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. And he was hung, and later on his sons were hung. Verse 26. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of all that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail. So they ordained this, right, as a holy day going forward. That day and their children and their children's children, right, and anyone that would keep these customs would keep these days, right, keep this feast, I should say. It says that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. So in the 12th month, right, on the 13th and 14th day would be the feast of Purim. Verse 28. So now you have the history behind that feast or that holy day. Verse 28. And all these days should be, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. See, so this is one of those feasts or gatherings, right, that we keep, holy days that we keep. Verse 29. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them. So once again, though, that's the 13th and 14th day of or was it the 14th or 15th? I just forgot that. Let's go back, take a look. And I might have said 13th and 14th earlier, but let me just go and confirm here. Yep. Let's see. It says, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same, they rested and made it a day of feasting. So it might have been the 14th and 15th, because they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar. Yeah, so 14th and 15th day, because 13th was really when they did the fighting and the defending of themselves and their loved ones. Verse 31, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fasting and their cry. So just as there were appointed times, where there were certain fasts were kept, right? These days were also appointed times, just like other days of the year that we would have different holy days that we would keep from generation to generation. These were now added to that. Verse 32, and the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Hence, we have a record today. But that brings us to the end of Esther, the 9th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.